Erik Horne here on a special college football offseason edition of the Andscape Roundtable with Bill Rhoden, Clinton Yates, and Jean-Jacques Taylor. And we are talking once again about Deion Sanders in Colorado. It's been an interesting offseason to say the least for the Colorado Buffaloes football program. And my man Clinton Yates had the great idea. We should do some grades for Deion Sanders, Shiloh, Shedeur, the Buffaloes, the spring football game, the sellout of next season's tickets, the lack of recruiting, the transfers, the bankruptcy, all of the things. Let's talk about it all. Let's start with JJT. JJT, you are the expert on all things Deion Sanders. If you had to get a letter grade to the offseason, what would you give the letter grade to Colorado Deion Sanders and why?
I give him a C right now. And I think the big thing is I thought they started off well in terms of offseason and recruiting. The thing that troubled me is that and I don't know how much of it is Deion and how much of it is today's college football. Meaning you get a transfer from the Ohio State University at running back, and as soon as he shows up, Dylan Edwards leaves and goes to Kansas State. Alton McCaskill leaves. I think he went to Ole Miss. Like, what's up with that? And I say that in the sense of if you had a Power 5 program, wherever you go, okay, I was the 5-star number 1 running back they recruited this year. Next year, what are they trying to do? Go get the 5-star number 1 running back again. There is no avoiding of competition. I told my dude who plays at one of them Texas high school football powers, when he got in the 7th grade, dog, the days of you get playing time are over. You're going to earn whatever you get. And if you want to make sure you play, you better show them coaches that you are invaluable. And so but the bottom line is those guys left, and those to me were big losses. They've added some offensive linemen. We'll see how they go. It's Deion. There's always going to be some tumult around the season, whether it's real or imagined. Every big-time program around, and I wouldn't even call Colorado a big-time program right now. It's had transfers, it's had drama with NIL, all of that. But because he's always in the middle of the firestorm and the epicenter of it, some of it his fault, some of it not his fault. I think it leads to a lot of conversation. I mean, I don't know anybody else who's had a story written on every player who left their program. And even if we go back to last year and he cut all those guys, how many of them cats went to Power 5 programs? Not many of them. And how many went to what we would call big-time college programs? None of them. So, I think it's much of the same this year. Every school loses a bunch of dudes, especially if you're a marginal school. We just focus on him because he's Deion.
Surprising thing to me, despite the tumultuous kind of talk around recruiting, a lot of transfers in again. Went and counted on 247 Sports. They had the number 22 recruiting class in the country, and that's not bad considering that they only signed like 11 guys, and they got 42 transfers. So, despite people having like some criticisms about Deion's recruiting style, not doing in-home visits and such, to bring in the number 22 class, that reflects pretty well that you are getting some good guys in there, whether it's transfers or guys that you're signing outright. Clinton, how would you grade the offseason so far?
As somebody that did not get very many good grades in high school or college because I hated school, I respect the hell out of this process. So let's just say C is a passing grade, and let's not go with D's get degrees. They get a D for me because they're just below passing, because I feel that in my brain this offseason, it occurred to me this is going to be chaotic for the duration. Not like, once he gets his guys, once he sets up his systems, then it's going to be some sort of well-oiled machine. It just kind of felt like, well, they're just going to kind of run with this as how they do it. Now, to JJT's point, transfers do make that very difficult in terms of the idea of keeping any sort of continuity, but that's everybody. However, that's just not the same framework that Deion and them are working under. They have to understand that people are looking at them, and not to judge, but it's going to affect how kids feel about it. And that little incident with the kid going back and forth with Shedeur and Prime on Twitter in real time, to me, was sloppy. That's just not the kind of thing I think when you think about leadership and when you think about young men coaching. So, we asked this question last year. What's the measure of success? Is it wins? Is it trophies? Is it respectability? At some point, respectability goes beyond wins and losses. And sure, they've won obviously more games than they did in the previous 2 years combined or whatever before he got there. But like, if everybody who runs through the program ends up leaving with some sort of sour experience, if they don't feel that they were the preordained destined ones from Deion, that's unfortunate. And so we'll see where that goes. Again, it's year 2, but the turnover of guys is something that is regular in college football, but I don't necessarily know if it's still the best way to do things. We're still in question as to how that's going to work down the line for college football teams, big or little, to use your term, JT.
I would say before we get to Bill real quick that it's the coaching staff turnover would bother me more than the player turnover. When you
It's
change
the same difference to me, but yeah.
You change both your coordinators after year 1, there's a disconnect. Either you didn't hire the right people or there wasn't the right fit. Either way, it's not a positive because now you got coming in, bringing in a whole new system in year 2 when you should be getting solid footing. And here's what we do. Here's our identity. And here's how we start to sustain success.
Yeah. You see it with, your top programs that despite the fact that they lose coaches to other programs, they've established a culture. We talking about Alabama, and I don't want to put Colorado up there with Alabama because Nick Saban, had been doing that for a decade plus. But these guys are getting poached for coaches every year. But the culture is so strong that the drop off isn't that much, or you're arguably getting better when you bring in different ideas and different coaches every year because you already have an established culture. Now, we've got an established culture at Colorado right now where Deion Sanders is bored and he's going on the internet popping off. He even said he was bored. He went on the pregame show and he was like, "Oh, I was bored. I'm just gonna get at this kid." And Shador's like, "Oh, this kid was mid. I don't even remember him." Stuff like that. Bill, what's your grade on the offseason, factoring in all the things that we talked about, from the pettiness to the recruiting? What's your take?
Yeah, well, because since I'm the oldest person in our group, I'm a professor. I've taken the liberty to have a 2-tier grading system. The first tier grading system is how does Deion affect us in the media? That's the first tier. And the second tier is how does he affect the bottom line of reaching a bowl game? Well, for the first tier, I give him an A+ because Deion is the gift that keeps giving. I mean, we couldn't make this thing up. And you guys know it, man. I mean, he is a content machine, from day 1 to now. I mean, you look at the offseason, like you did, the back and forth. I mean, who does that? The back and forth between recruits and the head coach and the head coach's son. I mean, you can't make it up. The bankruptcy, you can't make it up. His son declares bankruptcy to get around paying a lawsuit that he got in high school. So then there's a parking ticket issue. He drives around this huge, the Maybach, drives around, and then he's parking where he's not supposed to park, and he gets booted and towed. So in terms of the media aspect, I give him an A+. Now, in terms of the thing that produced, whether he's going to get a thing, I think, and again, Eric, you mentioned Alabama. I said, do not ever do that again. Do not mention Colorado and Alabama in your entire journalistic career. Never do that again.
We'll hand out in-school suspensions.
Now, look, we'll see if Alabama can maintain with the DeBoer guy, because Saban's not going to be there anymore. But I get your point.
Eric, Colorado will have to win for the next 20 years for us to mention. We're just trying to get them to get to a bowl game, right? Any bowl game.
I prefaced that statement with, I am not comparing Colorado and Alabama. That was clearly,
I'm telling you what I heard.
That was blasphemous on my part. I apologize to Nick Saban and the Alabama program. Continue.
So in terms of, and I think my bottom line, I think we all agree, the first year for me was about, being there. I mean, I flew to TCU on my birthday because I knew this was going to be a circus, and it did not disappoint. This year, and I think we all agree, man, it's about, are you going to win or not? Now, they played 5 games before they even, I think we're going to know everything we need to know about Colorado after their 4th game. because they don't play a ranked team until their 5th game. I think they play Kansas State. Other than that, they play basically their level. So we're going to see. The transfers, I mean, it's bizarre. And I've always felt weird about the transfer portal because I kind of look at it probably from the perspective of parents, where, you send your kid there and then, he's playing at Colorado, wants to get a degree, and then this guy comes in and 75% of the roster gets turned over. And then the contradiction, and here's the thing, man, the thing about Deion is that we all have to guard against being manipulated, I mean, because he's a manipulative king. I'll go into a press conference and he'll say, hey, here's the GOAT. And and you got to basically put that in the thing of bullshit. I mean, not bull, but he knows he's a chess player and he knows how to do that stuff. But the bottom line is, are you going to win? And is he going to get to a bowl game? And I guess my second thing, and I guess I'll put this out to the group, his cupboard is bare. I've counted, he's almost got about 14 to 15 core players who are not going to be there after this season. His 2 sons and a bunch of other guys. Travis, they're not going to be there. So that cover for 2025 is totally bare, which leads me to think that Deion may not be there either, because the 2 motivations for him being there, he's coached his son, JJT? He's coached his son since like 5th grade, grammar school, right? And he's talked openly about how that's kind of been part of the motivation of him doing this. So now when those 2 guys are gone, plus all these other guys that are Travis and everybody else, it's not clear to me that Deion's going to be there. So to make my thing, I give him an A+ for what he does for us in the media. And in terms of the transfers, I'll give him, I tend to grade liberally, I'll give him a B, because it's either with a B sharp or B flat. And if he doesn't win, he's going to be flat. So I'll give him a B.
Do I have to give a grade?
You don't have to, but I will say this. I do think that there is something to be said. I talked to Andrea Adelson about this, who went to the spring game. She wrote for .com about it. We talked about it on ESPN Daily, and she was like, dude, there were 30,000 people there in the rain the whole game. Like, at some point, we have to wonder whether or not we consider our standards for what Deion may or may not do even higher than what the people there do. I think there is a large element, we've all been there, of just wanting something to do on Saturdays that is going to probably keep Deion around and out of whatever proverbial hot seat may or may not exist, because people don't care. Colorado football is not a thing that this generation of humans actually knows about. So for all of the bold promises he can give to old ladies, for the kids on campus, any pub is good pub to a certain degree, including people in town. And so, yeah, you can point up to the sky and say, well, Cordell and them won 30, 40 years ago. But I mean, outside of those 2 specifically, him and Westbrook on the sidelines before games, it's tough to really tell how much that's even going to matter at this point. If they continue to make money, enrollment continues to rise, ostensibly because, people want to be in Boulder. It's again, this question of metrics is going to be an interesting one. But I guess I'm hoping for myself that he doesn't just bail when his kids bail. That would really, I think, retroactively make me feel a lot more disappointed about this than I want to be, even though he's been very clear about his intentions to begin with. There was a thought to me that Deion could propel a step forward for a lot of different ways that plenty people coach, not just him. And I feel that if he ends up just kind of riding out with his own family, so to speak, then they won't have allowed enough time for that sort of idea to take roots in the ideas of anybody more largely other than just Colorado.
Yeah, I'd be disappointed if he left after this year, because like I said, I've known him forever, and his whole thing has always literally been coaching. And so that's what he enjoys most in the world. He's just doing it at the highest level now. I think his biggest shortcoming, and I've discussed this with him many times, so I ain't breaking no news here, is he's impatient. He's impatient with processes, and he's just an impatient person in any way you can measure. And so for me, it's about, they need success this year because you can recruit off the success. Like, you shouldn't have any problem getting a quarterback if you say, hey, look what we did with Shador. He's going number first round pick. We can do the same thing with you. We always got receivers, blase, blase. So to me, this is a huge year in terms of setting the foundation for recruiting, because you've had 2 years to recruit off Travis and recruit off Shador, and you got the big left tackle, so that's good. But you got to win to sustain it, because as we've seen, when you don't win, and the other thing is, man, and as I name drop here, I talked to Troy Aikman briefly about this a while back. To me, the biggest advantage Deion had was, I'm Deion Sanders. I'm charismatic. I can do things for you other coaches can't do. And that, to me, was a great selling point, a great tool he could use until NIL started out handing $1 million checks and $2 million checks and $5 million checks. I can like you as much as I want to like you. If mom and daddy say Colorado can only offer you $500,000, Ohio State or Alabama can offer you $3 million, pick one of them 2 schools you're going to, because Colorado ain't it. And so if they can't up their NIL game to take advantage of his charismatic appeal, I think it's just going to be hard to win like that.
Yeah. I mean, so Clinton, again, you said hope. I remember, it was like a long time ago during the NBA Finals. It was LA playing Dallas. And I remember I started my question off to Magic saying, Magic, do you ever hope? And he stopped me. He said, I don't hope. So I never ever began a question like, do you hope? Do you hope? It's one thing to hope that he won't leave, but another thing to be, will you be surprised?
No, I won't, Bill.
I
won't. Right? The reason I hope for it is not even for his own sake. It's for whoever, I don't know. I'm just throwing out names out there that are on the top of my list. I just say Terry Glenn's name. He was the defensive coordinator for Detroit. Let's say he just decided to go coach a team and he wanted to do it in the Deion fashion, meaning, no, I'm not going to be the person you thought, some foghorn, leghorn acolyte, you know what I mean? I'm going to be me and still be a coach in D1 football. That's what I'm concerned about, is that you know how it is in terms of opportunities we get. If the biggest, brightest star that ever sort of took this chance doesn't complete it to the satisfaction of what some people view as a actual commitment to the cause, I think it's going to affect other coaches down the line, young brothers who wanted to do something similar, who might have gotten a chance if it went differently with Deion. Is that fair to Deion or really anybody else involved? No. But I do think there is some level of a precedent that's being set here in terms of former players with, I don't want to say little to no coaching experience, because that's not really Deion's bag. You've played that long. You've been around enough locker rooms. You know enough football. But according to previous standards, prereqs, if we're going to continue with this academic, genre, like, they're not going to get the same chances Prime got. If it's looked at as, well, if he's going to do the same thing Prime did, which is bring in a bunch of people he knows, and when they're gone, he's gone too. That's unfortunate for everybody from a process standpoint. That's what I'm concerned about, Bill.
Yeah, and I guess my thing, I felt the same way in terms of hoping. I felt the same thing since I went to an HBCU. Man, it would be great if Deion really just stayed at Jackson State, thinking that in my heart, knowing intellectually that was not going to happen at all. Sure. Deion, at the end of the day, is about Deion. And I agree with you, but I think that, and I think we all agree that the bottom line on all this, I hear about going to the spring game in the rain, all that. You got to win, man. At a certain point, you have to win. All this, the smoke and the mirrors, and I'll fly out there for the first game. But if you're 0-5, if you start off this season 1-4, 1-5, at some point, it's going to catch up to you. And who knows? Maybe you'll get half your wish in that he'll stay in coaching, but maybe it's not going to be a Colorado. Because he realizes that Colorado is not, Erik, with all due respect, Colorado is not an elite program. It's not an elite program. It's better than Jackson State and better than, somewhere, but it's not an elite program. He may jump somewhere else. I mean, again, we've talked about this for 20-something minutes, which is why I gave him an A+, because it's still the gift that keeps giving. But at a certain point, man, and I'm kind of there, so, okay, Deion, I love you, brother. I love what you're doing and all that. I get where I fit in this whole PR machine, but at a certain point, you got to win. And that's what I think, at least that's where I land at this conversation. Has he done enough with the transformation of the roster. I mean, get this, man, and I believe it's weird. He comes in and he turns in 75%. He chases off 70% of the roster, brings in a whole nother group of people who says it's better. Now this year he chases off half of them and saying, well, but no, they weren't as good as I thought they were, and brings in another. That is not sustainable. Even in NIL, that's not sustainable. But I'm just hoping for all the reasons you mentioned, Clinton, for what his success means to other young Black coaches.
Right.
And I do think the racism is so deep that I don't know if that's going to happen. But for that reason alone, I hope that he's successful. Well, I hope it would be great. It would be great if he's successful, and that's where I'm intrigued. And what's intriguing to me also, I'm here in Indianapolis at the NBA playoffs. I'm really looking forward. We're talking about Deion now. I'm looking forward to jumping from Deion to Kyrie Irving. It's just, again, these are the gifts that just keep giving. So,
I think, and I've talked to him about this. One of the reasons he's in the portal like this is he figured, I'm Deion Sanders. I can't go 1-10 and talk about I got a 5-year plan to build, because critics aren't going to give me a 5-year plan to build. I got to win now. And he talks about it all the time. And this is his way of, the best way for me to win now is to go through the portal and pick and choose my high school players. And we'll see if that works out, and we'll see if that strategy works. But that's the thought behind the process.
Yeah, I was a little surprised by it. And I think, I forgot to mention earlier, Dylan Edwards. I thought that was really a blow. Not just competitively, but what we're talking about is the perception. And, at some point, man, you got to treat people well. You got to treat people well. You cannot keep strip mining these young kids, turn them over, discarding them, getting a new group, turning them over, discarding them, and keep pissing people off. At some point, and we all know that, even in our business, you can't really be a jerk and succeed. You just can't exploit people and use people, because what's the difference between you and a white coach? We're all doing the same thing. We're all exploiting young Black kids. So I think, we could debate that, but I just think at some point, man, you got to treat people. You just can't, whether you're Black, green, or yellow, you cannot exploit people. You cannot exploit young people and get away with it.
And
Bill is transactional.
Yeah, and Bill, to go back to your the main point about winning, at some point you got to retain your 5-star talent. You got to retain your 4-star talent. If you're bringing in transfers, a bunch of transfers every year, and a few of those guys paying out, that's fine. But if you recruit guys like Dylan Edwards or Cormani McClain, and then those guys transfer out in a year,
right? That's
an opportunity missed. Like Alabama and some of these other programs, again, I bring up Alabama, I'm not comparing them, but the reason that they are so good year after year is they retain 5-star talent, and that builds their depth. We saw that last year when we went to Colorado. They don't have the depth of talent to be able to, play consistent defense for 4 quarters.
Right.
So it's
Travis goes out and their season goes in the tank.
Yeah, you lose your best player. You lose Travis Hunter. You're too dependent upon a couple of guys. So even if Cormani McClain didn't play a ton for them last year, I thought that was going to be a positive experience for him to go through the rough stuff of the first year and then come back next year and be able to put his 5-star talent on the field more consistently. Now you lose that and you're starting from scratch again. So who's to say that's not going to happen with Jordan Seaton next year, where you got a 5-star, you play him, and then he transfers out? And that's a challenge for any program nowadays, but it's even more so of a challenge for a program that's not consistently bringing in tens of 20 of 4- and 5-star talent guys. That's going to be the detriment to them winning more than anything. Is retaining those guys.
Really answered your own question. And I'm going to use Ohio State instead of Alabama. Well, Ohio State bring in 6 5-stars every year. So 2 of them hit, 2 of them become just guys, and 2 of them leave. You don't care about the 2 that leave because you got 6 more coming in the next year. And the same process plays out. The problem at Colorado is when you have Cormani McClain and he leaves, you don't have another 5-star necessarily coming in, or you just have 1. And so, it's whenever you bring in these talented guys, you never hit on all of them. And when you're only bringing in 1 or 2, you hope that you hit. But the problem now, and when I say it's all transactional, is even if you hit on those guys, if you Colorado or any school like Colorado, comparable to Colorado, and you're not winning, what's going to happen? Alabama comes through, Ohio State comes through, Michigan comes through and says, why would you play there and lose when we can pay you more and you can compete for a national championship here? So the whole game has changed. And, the thing about Deion is, and it's the good and the bad, it's the bitter and the sweet. He's uncompromising on certain core values as a coach. And so if you don't want to hit those, he doesn't really care whether you're a 5-star or a 4-star or a no-name guy or not. You got to go. Now, at one point, you'd be like, well, you should have more leeway for guys who are better players because you don't have enough of them. And he does at some point. But at the bottom line is he's still like, you can take it or leave it. Why? Because he's Deion and he's never had to acquiesce to anybody.
Yeah. Yeah, to your point, JJT, I don't know if being impatient and building a program are compatible.
That was a whole problem, Doc.
I don't know if that's compatible, growing a program. So we'll see. I mean, I'm also very intrigued this year, and again, that's why I'm kind of intrigued about this year, is about Shedeur. How really good is he? And I kind of, for some reason, I don't know why I keep thinking of Shedeur and Bronny James in terms of, them getting a nod. I think it's a little apples and oranges, but you still get some kind of tick up because of who your father is. And I'm just wondering what kind of season is Shedeur going to have? What are scouts saying about him? So that is intriguing unto itself, just as a footballer. How good is he? Yeah.
Shedeur is going to get drafted, so he's already better than Bronny James. And Bronny might get drafted. I don't know how I got into a Bronny. But Shedeur is going to get drafted. He's good, man. He's a good player. And so is Bronny, but he's not a top. He's not a first round talent.
Right. So we'll see. I mean, like you said, there's so many questions to be answered. Clinton brings up, his. I think, Clinton, you're feeling that Deion's passion for coaching goes beyond his sons and Travis.
I hope so, or the impact. And even if it's at another school. Look, if the Colorado experiment doesn't work out, when we first saw this all transforming in terms of Prime going back to college so he could end up being a coach in D1, because he had to get a degree that never got at Florida State. There's still this idea in the back of my mind that the big carrot at the end of the road here is getting that Knowles job or some other job that's actually in the sort of, I don't know, delta of where he used to be in his football life, maybe even somewhere in Dallas. But, if it's not Colorado and it is somewhere else, that's great. But I think what he brings from a style standpoint, just in terms of the personality, and I don't mean specific to him, I mean whatever it may be for who that brother is a trait that hopefully becomes a copyable, a repeatable motion, as we say in baseball, for other schools. Like, hey, you know what? This guy's got some personality. He's played enough football. He cares enough about it. Why not give it a shot, as opposed to whatever? If there can be more of those from whatever comes of this Colorado situation, I think that ultimately we've got a big win here. My feelings about Prime aside.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I was thinking about that before we got on. I will miss this, but there's no other coach in college football. The reason I got interested in college football in terms of covering it is because of Prime. Otherwise, it's very milquetoast. It's very coach speak. You're right.
Guys are boring, basically. Yeah,
precisely. Nobody does what Deion has done. If he resigns, if he retires next year, he's left a footprint. Nobody has done it the way he's done it. And then I don't know if nobody will. So that's why I give him an A+, because what he has done for us, for the media, it's been a tremendous narrative, a great story. But I just think that, you still kind of have to win, particularly for all those being a brother, being a black guy, being Deion, he's going to be judged very harshly. There are a lot of people who are waiting. Remember the Oregon game when Oregon smacked him, and what's the coach? I don't even remember the damn coach's name.
Lanning,
who hadn't done shit. I don't know who the hell Lanahan is. Who is this guy? But yet he was he used his whole pregame thing to like rail on Deion. This isn't about, so I think there are a lot of people like that who are waiting to ambush Deion. And I guess I took that personally just as a black man cheering for another black man to do well and seeing how people are just waiting in the weeds to ambush him. So it's kind of a mix. It's a mixed bag. And I guess that's why I have a sort of ambivalence that I really want him to do really well, but I'm also trying to look at the truth where it leads and be really very realistic about this. So, I think that's why he gets an A+.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
I was going to give my final grades, but JJT, I want you to get yours in.
No, I was just going to say, the part of it is he represents a threat. He's a real threat to the establishment for the reasons we've discussed. If he has success, then maybe this idea that we have to get this coach who looks a certain way, who talks a certain way, who acts a certain way, maybe we don't have to do that. And then maybe that opens up the door to a whole nother level of coaches. And when that happens, all that nepotism ends, or at least gets decreased quite a bit. And I don't think there's any doubt that the white establishment in terms of college coaches worries about that, whether they speak it or not. When they had their little boys meetings, they talk about it. And so I think that's why you had, all these unnamed, and see, we go back to when we talk about journalism, you can't have one unnamed source that says, Deion will fail because of this. You need multiples and you need examples of why. Because if you just taking shots unnamed, criticizing people, to me, those are people who are threatened, and they use the media to take shots. Nobody has ever said Deion's a perfect coach. He's his own dude, and his record will show whether he succeeds or fails. But there's no doubt that there's a bunch of people waiting for him to fail because they feel threatened by it.
C- for all the things we were talking about as far as culture, pettiness, which will all be water under the bridge if he wins. A for entertainment, and to quote the great Clinton Yates, Deion Sanders is not a foghorn, leghorn disciple. I love that.
I said.
We should have ended it on that, man. Foghorn, leghorn disciple is all I see is just SEC coaches just running this conveyor belt of SEC coaches. Just I reckon. Anyway, man, this has been a great conversation. Thanks everybody for joining us. Check us out on Andscape.com. We're gonna have to decide when the next summit is gonna be, where we talk about Deion in person all together. I'm looking at the schedule right now. We're gonna have to figure it out. But thanks everybody for coming together, and thanks everybody for watching.
All right, bro.